Let's start at 69 actually. Last week's Parsha. You got a Chumash, open up to the beginning of Vayeshev. It's chapter 37 in Bereshit. The story of Yosef and his brothers. We started to talk about it last week. We said that the big overview was that this was a terrible sin. One of the cardinal sins of the Jewish people, together with the sin of the golden calf, between Ben Adam LaMakom, Ben Adam LaChavero, trouble that the Jewish people have to deal with. From then on was this issue of rivalry and hatred between the brothers. We talked about that. We saw some midrashim say this. I'd like to delve a little bit into some details about the fight and the enmity between the brothers, showing you a few psukim. 69, page 69, yeah, he's got it, yeah. And then connected to Hanukkah, believe it or not, the Hanukkah story somehow is connected to this story of Yosef and his brothers in more way than one. But let's start first of all and try to analyze a little bit. What do we see? So let's Parshat Vayeshev, yeah. Bereshit, chapter 37, the bottom, page 69 in this edition. So look at verse 2. The end of verse 2 says, Joseph brought unto his father their evil report. So when we talk about hatred between the brothers, as they say, it takes two to tango. It's not only the brothers that are guilty because they sold him down to Egypt. Who started, as they say? Well, Yosef tattletaled on them, it sounds like. Yosef was, you're not going to make a lot of friends if you tell on your brothers to your father, right? He brought their evil report. Not necessarily a good thing to do. Okay, so far so good? Number 3, verse 3. And Israel loved Joseph more than all of his children because he was the son of his old age, and he made him a coat of many colors. Bava Kama, there is a statement by the sages, and they say, because of a coat which cost 2 shekels, or whatever it is, the Jewish people went down to Egypt and into exile. You think it takes 2 to tango? Actually, there's a third party who's guilty here. Yaakov Avinu himself. He said he caused this jealousy between the brothers. There's another relationship, right? Between the brothers. It's not so simple to be a father. You show favorites, you're going to cause them to be angry with each other. You're going to cause them jealousy. Yaakov is called out by the sages for causing the rift between the brothers. Because what is he showing favoritism and buying a coat for Yosef? Because he loved him more. Of course they're going to hate him, right? That's verse 4. It says, and the brethren saw that their father loved him more than all his brethren, and they hated him. So the hatred here was caused first by Yosef, and then by the father, Yaakov. Of course, there's still no excuses. Doesn't mean that they had to hate him, but we understand a little bit they hated him, but it says that they hated him. They hated Yosef, which of course is a sin. They're guilty too, obviously. And what they do later, well, we know they're guilt because they sold him, or they were contemplating even killing him, which of course nobody condones that. Even if you are angry, or even if you have been tattled on, you don't kill someone and you don't sell them down the river. But the start of the story is to pay attention to what's going on in the relationship, both what Yosef did and what the father did. Okay. Next line, though, is perhaps the key to the breakdown of this family. The end of verse 4 says, they hated him, and they could not speak peaceably unto him. V'lo yachlu dabero l'shalom. Even if somebody offends you, we learn this inside the Rambam, if you remember. The Rambam says, you should not bear hatred in your heart. The continuation of the verse in chapter 19 of Vayikra is, Hocheach tochiach et amitecha. You shall surely rebuke your friend. If somebody did something wrong to him, you must go to him and say to him, why did you wrong me? And then you have a conversation. Maybe he can explain what he did. You don't just bear a grudge in your heart and be angry at him if you leave it inside. You should have a dialogue. You should confront the person, and then you can talk it out. You can work it out. Here, what does it say? Lo yachlu dabero l'shalom. They hated him so much they couldn't even talk to him. They could not speak to him. And this is the very critical point of, things are just going to go from bad to worse if you can't talk, if you can't, because your hatred is so great, you can't even speak to each other. Nowadays, in the modern times, there's a lot of hatred within Israeli society. It started way back when there was a political assassination. And one of the results of that horrible rift in society...
Who was waiting for that? Who was waiting for that?
They assassinated the prime minister. Even before that, there was a grenade. That's right, Emil whatever his name was, something like that. Greenswag. But after the Rabin assassination, a lot of people decided to do something. They realized that there was just countries being torn apart to the level of violence, and groups of dialogue cropped up, and people said, we got to be talking to each other. We're not talking to each other. And now too, in the last year of the reform in the courts, the court system reform, and all the protests for, against, and a lot of people are saying we need to talk to each other. It's so important that we don't live in our own little bubbles, and we don't know what the other people feel, and why the other person is doing what they're doing, and it's really, really dangerous to society. It all comes from this verse here, that the brothers could not talk to Yosef. Lo yachlu dabero l'shalom.
But he instigated because it says he brought evil reports.
Oh yeah, the Torah is being quite honest here and quite open. It's laying the blame on everybody. Yosef was to blame, the father was to blame for the favoritism, and they are to blame as well, of course, for what they did afterwards. But if you ask me, this sentence is critical here. Their hatred got to such a great level that they couldn't talk peacefully with each other. But then it gets worse. Ready? Verse 5. Vayachalom Yosef chalom vayaged le'echav v'sifo tzenoto. And here, I heard somebody yesterday giving me a Dvar Torah, taking it at face value. He was saying we can understand there's different types of... today there are people with communication issues. So there's even a medical spectrum called the autism spectrum. They're not aware of what other people think or what other people say. They don't get the social cues properly. And there's all sorts of treatments. You can work on it, and there's special classes. They're called, even in kindergarten, there's special, they're called kitat tikshoret in Israel. Special, kids with communication problems. Yosef, he has a dream, and he tells it to them. And it causes them to hate them more. Yosef was not being aware that they hate him. And that you can't have a normal conversation. You're going to tell them about your dream? And of course, we know what the dream is. It goes on to say, hey, listen up. I had this cool dream. He's not catching that this is not causing a good result on the other end. what happens? He tells them the dream that they're, with the sheaves. Skip ahead, and in verse 8, the brothers respond, "Oh yeah, what are you trying to say?" It could be that Yosef was not trying to say anything. Could be he was just trying to share his dream, but obviously he was not aware that. Maybe he should have been aware. To us, it seems kind of transparent. But verse 8, it says, "Shalt thou indeed reign over us? Or shalt thou indeed have dominion over us?" And they hated him yet the more for his dreams and for his works, meaning his deeds. As they remembered that he tattled on them, and also now the dreams. So it's one thing building up on the other. Yosef's not self-aware enough, or not paying attention enough to the relationship, and is making it worse. And then verse 9, he goes, has another dream. And he's still not picking up. What happens? He dreams, and he tells it to his brothers, and he tells them about the stars and the moon and the 11 stars bowing down to him. And in verse 10, it says, and he told it to his father and to his brethren. This time he tells it to his father too. And his father yells at him. His father rebuked him. What is this dream that I was dreaming? Shall I and your mother and thy brethren indeed come to bow ourselves before thee? And his brothers envied him. So, Yosef is not guiltless here. Fascinating how Yosef doesn't necessarily pick up the cues. The truth is that the next story, we've read the Parsha. Yaakov sends, or Yisrael sends Yosef to find his brothers, and he gets there, and he's wandering in the field. Verse 15, a certain man found him, and behold, he's wandering in the field. And the man asked him, what seekest thou? And he says, I seek my brethren. Tell me, I pray thee, where they feed their flocks. This conversation doesn't seem to flow either. Some random man finds him in the field, and he starts telling him, I'm looking for brothers. Do you know who they are? But who are you? Hello? What's going on here? There seems to be something missing here in the communication department for Yosef's social abilities.
Isn't this an angel?
Could be. And he says, I'm looking for my brothers. And then the next verse, 17, the man or the angel says to them, they are departed hence. What does Rashi say? Famous Rashi says, Nas'u mizeh. They have departed from here. They've left here. Rashi says, Nas'u min ha'achava. Remember last week, I told you, we said the achava, brotherhood. This is the cardinal sin, the primal sin of the Jewish people, the Yaakov's children, is that they didn't keep up the brotherhood in the sense of brotherly love. And Rashi says here, Nas'u mizeh. It's not that they physically left. They were in this valley, and now they're in a different valley. They went because the field, the crops, they needed the grazing area for their flock. No. This was a hint. I don't know if Yosef got it. But the hint was, you're saying I'm looking for my brothers. They don't love you as a brother anymore. You're walking into a trap. You're going to go up to them. It's dangerous. He doesn't hear it. Nas'u min achva. They left the brotherhood. And he goes after him and says, okay. And so he went after them in Dotan. And of course, verse 19 now, sorry, 18, verse 18, it says, and when they saw him afar off, even before he came near unto them, they conspired against him to slay him. Here too, we hear between the lines a little bit of an allusion to they saw him from afar. Right? That's what happens when you distance yourself from your brother. Consider yourself distant. We use it as a metaphor today. Being distant is your internal feelings are distant. You don't feel close anymore. They saw him from afar. And they all make all sorts of plans. When your brother's very distant and you don't have anything to do with him, and you look at him from the outside perspective, as you're no longer together, part of the same family, you're going to have all sorts of plans and all sorts of conspiracies. And this is a continuation of not talking. They weren't able to talk to each other. The next thing is they see them far away. They view him as the other, right? And what do? They plan, conspire to kill him. Ay, 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 ay. And then verse 19, they say to one another, in the Hebrew it's, Vayomer ish el achiv. Who are the achim? Only the 10 tribes, not him. He's not one of their brothers anymore. They're saying to each other, he's not our. Then they say, Hine bala chalamot halazeh. They give him another nickname. They call him, here's the dreamer, this master of dreams. He's coming to us. So they already delegitimize him. And they call him names. And now let us go and kill him, verse 20, and put him into the pit. And we'll say, we've got our alibi, there's some wild animal. Here there's two interpretations Rashi brings. One is that they said, we'll see what happens to his dreams. In other words, they were trying to get back at him for his dreams. I think another interpretation is that this is God saying that this is sort of like the narrator saying, we'll see the end of this. Obviously, this is not going to work. Sort of like a plot against his dreams. Dreams here were considered to be some kind of a prophecy. Without getting into the whole story of the dreams right now, there was one attempt. Reuben says, let's not kill him. Let's throw him into the pit without killing him. Okay. Verse 23, skip ahead. Page 71. You with me? Are you with me so far? We're following along and sort of describing in more detail this hatred between the brothers and how it gets played out. Yosef came unto his brother, and they stripped Yosef out of his coat of many colors that was on him. When you strip somebody of his coat, you stripped him of his place in the family, of his honor, of his respect, and they threw him into the pit. In verse 25, they sat down to eat, without him obviously, and then it goes on to say that they sold him. Actually, at the beginning of verse 20, right, we said that they said, in verse 19, it said, they said one to another, Vayomer ish el achiv. It's written in the singular. They said each man, one man, ish el achiv. Our sages say, who was the instigator? Who were those two people? In singular. One man said to his brother. Who was it? There were 10. According to tradition, who was it? Shimon and Levi. Shimon and Levi. So Shimon said to Levi, let's kill him. And then here too, in verse, where was I? In verse 27, it says, come, let us sell them to the Ishmaelites and let our hand not be in. This is already in the plural. This is all of us. This is the other 8 leading. Ki achinu b'sareinu vayishmeu echav. Here we have plural. This is a softening already. They're sort of trying to do tshuva a little bit. So we're not like Shimon and Levi. Just, let's kill him. Shimon talking to Levi. Here, it's softer. They all together, they get together as a group. They're not going to kill him, but let's sell him down the river. And because he's still our brother. So there's, of course, different groups within Israel, within the tribes. And then they sell him down. And, they do the whole trick with the blood on the goat's blood on the... So far, so good. To Yaakov, right. Okay, next, I want to fast forward, because I want to connect this to Hanukkah. But fast forward, before this, Yosef, he has another miscommunication when he gets to Egypt. not once and not twice, right? With Eshet Potiphar, she also takes his cloak off, and there's some kind of miscues there. She accuses him, he runs away, not the best communication. And then, at the end of the parsha, I have a friend of mine who says to me, here are the four most important words in the whole Torah. I want you to please look on chapter 40. Chapter 40, verse 7. It's on page 75. We find Yosef, who's in the pit. He's in not the pit of the brothers, but the jail, which he finds himself after she tattletaled on him. He's a very charismatic guy, Yosef, and he was successful everywhere, but he got into trouble one more time, and now he's in jail, and now he's in charge of the jail in chapter 40. You with me? So far, so good? Now, who's with him in the jail? Sarah Mashkin and Sarah Ofim, right? The chief of the butlers and the chief of the bakers. And you can imagine what the pit looks like. What did you think jail looked like in ancient Egypt? Dark.
Under the dungeon.
Dungeon. Moist. You imagine those poor captives in Gaza, tunnels of the Hamas. Couldn't have been much better in ancient Egypt. The jail was probably a pretty sad scene, and you don't know what's going to happen to you the next day. Probably people died there. And it's an amazing thing. Verse 7 says, 6, Yosef came unto them in the morning, and looked upon them, and behold, they were sad. My friend asks, they were sad? Of course they were sad. They were in Egypt. They were in the jail. They were in the jail of, they used to be important officers, ministers in front of the king, and now they're thrown. Who knows what's going to happen? Of course they were sad. Apparently Yosef had developed a certain sensitivity that maybe he didn't have when he was talking to the brothers. And he can see on their faces, even in the worst conditions, something even worse. There's something, they're more despondent than usual, more than you would expect, more despairing than ever. And he says to them, he says, and he asked, verse 7, he asked Pharaoh's officers that were with him in the ward of his Lord's house, saying, wherefore look ye so sadly today? Madua pneichem ra'im hayom. Why are your faces fallen today? Wow. To have that sensitivity, even in the worst conditions possible. And do you think it was his place? Do you think he was the staff psychologist in the warden in jail? He didn't have to try to figure out, do the psychotherapy. Oh, why are you so sad today? The very fact that he engaged them in conversation. First of all, he noticed, and then he turns to them and tries to help them. Obviously, he was trying to improve their lot. So what are you looking so bad for? He was trying to cheer them up, maybe. And that was the beginning of the turn of events. Obviously, you know that he was able to interpret their dreams, and then a couple of years later, Pharaoh had a dream, and they pulled him out to interpret the dreams. He rose to power. It all started right here, in this sensitivity of Yosef. His brothers are long gone, but he's being sensitive to his partners in jail. And this is a wonderful sensitivity of Yosef. In any case, the end of the story we all know, that the brothers come down, and we mentioned last week that somehow, perhaps the exile in Egypt of the entire tribes of Israel is somewhat of a punishment for this fight between Yosef and his brothers. And now I want to connect it to Hanukkah. Here's a page comes from a book called The Bnei Yissaschar. The author is Yissaschar, I can't remember his name. It's a famous Hasidic, sort of Kabbalistic book. It's divided up as a commentary on the different months of the year. And he says, we have enough for everybody? One more? Sure. I'm sorry, I didn't find an English for this, but it's very curious, very wonderful little insight into Hanukkah, connecting it somehow to the story of Yosef and his brothers. First of all, the tradition is now that we read the Parshat HaShavua approximately the same time every year, right? Because we have Simchas Torah, we finish the entire Torah in 1 year, and so there's always, we read these stories of Yosef and his brothers, it's the last 4 parshiot in Sefer Bereshit, we always read them around Hanukkah time. And the Hasidim say nothing is by accident. There must be some kind of a divine plan that there must be some connection between the story of Hanukkah and Yosef and his brothers. And let's see how the Bnei Yissaschar, that's what he's usually called by the Hasidim, how he makes that connection here. Hinei Mosif Chumash Naaseh Hanes Al Yedei Kohanim Bnei Levi. The miracle of Hanukkah was perpetrated by who? Who were the leaders of the rebellion? Who purified the temple? Bnei Hashmonim, Kohanim, who were, right? Matityahu ben Yochanan, Kohen Gadol. Kohanim, of course, are from the tribe of Levi. And he says, we have to understand that why they were chosen to be the leaders of the rebellion. Al pi mashkatuv be Migale Amukot. This is a Hasidic interpretation. Parshat Vayeshev Galut Yavan Haya letakein chet mechirat Yosef. Wow. The exile of the Greeks, right? So we said that there's actually 4 kingdoms, 4 exiles, right? Egypt, and then Assyrian, and then Babylon, and then Greek. The Greek, right? Some people don't count the Assyrians; they count the Roman exiles, the 4th kingdom. Anyway, you count it. He says, why was this exile? It's called an exile, even though we call it a persecution. Okay, the persecution of the Jewish people by the Greeks. Why did we have to suffer through this? To fix the sin, to atone for it, and fix the sin of the brothers who sold Yosef. Okay, so here it is explicitly in the Megillah Amukos, there's a Hasidic Perush. And now how does he figure that? Where does it come from? Melech Yavan begimatria Yosef. If you do the numerical value of the word Yosef, a numerical value of the word Melech Yavan, it's the same thing. Yeah.
So what's that?
Sorry? Melech Yavan is Yosef. Same gematria. Because Melech Yavan is coming to sort of punish the Jewish people for selling Yosef. That's what he's trying to say. And then we're going to see that there's a fixing too. And the Bnei Yissaschar himself adds, this is what Megillah Amukot said, the 2 different commentaries. One is quoting the other. And the Bnei Yissaschar adds, nearly Oda Melech HaRasha Za Yashmo Antiochus. We know that the name of this Greek overlord was called Antiochus, and that's also the gematria of Yosef. Yeah, isn't that cool? Antiochus is Yosef. Same numerical value. Very cool hints.
What's the number?
The number is 136, if I'm not mistaken. 160, let's see, Samech and Pei, 60 plus 80 is 140, plus another 10, so it's 156. 156 is the total number. And you can work it out, 156. Then Nira Yosef haya ben Zukunim bar Chakim le ki zak. Yeah, what?
So the Vav is the 6.
Vav is 6, yeah. כי זקן זה שכאן החוכמה, כי חוכמה התורה שלמד יעקב מן שם ועבר, מסרה לו, ונראה לעבד נמכר יוסף למצרים, אשר שם היו חוכמות חיצוניות. הנה מהפגם הזה נתהווה באחרית מלכות יוון, נקרא חושך, חוכמות חיצוניות, חוכמת יוון, כסיל בחושך הולך. והנה רצו להגביר חוכמות חיצוניות ולבטל חוכמות התורה. He adds in that the Yosef was called Ben Zakuni. Ben Zakuni means the youngest, the child of old age. Right? When you're old, you have a baby, so it's it's called Ben Zakuni. But Zakunim, particular, is a term used for chokhmah, for wisdom. Yosef is associated with wisdom. Now, they sold. Now, where did Yosef have wisdom from? Who got it from Yaakov, his father? Where did Yaakov get it from? From Yitzchak. Where did Yitzchak get it from? Avram. Where did Avram get it from? Shem and Ever. There was this tradition, this mystical wisdom tradition of the Jewish people, which all got passed down to Yosef. What did the brothers do? They sold him to Egypt. Egypt is already the outside. Other types of wisdom. What kind of wisdom? Who represents the wisdom? In the Hanukkah story, it's the Greek wisdom. That's the Hellenistic culture. So basically, this selling of the Jewish wisdom and making it get lost and being overcome by the wisdom of the Greeks, this is how he interprets that. This is what it means, that this was what the brothers did. Basically, they sold off our Jewish wisdom tradition. And that's what was going on in the Hanukkah story. And then, why do we light candles? Hanukkah, candle represents the pure oil of the true Torah wisdom, which is the fixing of the Yavan story. But there's one more hint to this idea. I'm not going to read every word inside. I'm not going to translate every word. He says, of course, the light symbolizes the wisdom. The menorahs on the south side, that's where represents the wisdom. We covered it in another class. I want to skip to the next paragraph now. Next paragraph says as follows. You'll find a good reason. Lama shakla Yehuda, let me try to say, b'zeh hanes. Why was Yehuda being caught with this miracle? Shenaseh malchut acheret lefi sha'ah. Why was Yehuda not the leadership when it came to the Hanukkah story? Who took leadership when it came to the Hanukkah story? We said before, it was the Kohanim, B'nai Levi. Why? Because Yehuda, the natural leader, he sinned. He's the one who suggested, let's sell him down the river. Fine, he didn't. It was, not as bad as Shimon and Levi. We'll see in a minute. We'll get back to Shimon and Levi. But Yehuda failed by suggesting his brothers, let's sell him to the Yishmaelim or going down to Egypt. And therefore, lefisha lihiyot shehu haya hayoetz lemchirat Yosef. He's the one who gave the advice to sell Yosef. And he brings another source for it. The Gemara says that it was Yehuda who tried to do this trick of selling him, and so the miracle was not through Yosef. Next paragraph. Let's go back to Levi. Who was the miracle? It was by the Kohanim. What was Levi's point? Take a look at the last paragraph. It says, "Hinei Levi sheshatak be'emor lo Shimon achiv ve'ata lechu v'nahargehu." Right? It says, "Vayomer ish el achiv," and our sages says it was Shimon saying to Levi. What did Levi respond? Torah doesn't say. Shimon was the real instigator, and he says to Levi, let's go kill him. Levi was his partner, but he didn't take an active part. Hine ka'et masar nafsho al chokhmat haTorah. What is Levi doing now? He's doing tshuva. Instead of selling Yosef or killing Yosef, destroying Yosef, representing the wisdom tradition of the Jewish people, Levi becomes, he does tshuva, Levi becomes the Kohanim, the people who teach Torah to the rest of the Jewish people. Who wears the breastplate. Breastplate which represents the wisdom of the Torah. The Kohen Gadol wears the breastplate. There's associated with keeping the wisdom of the Torah. And so Levi did tshuva. And he fought to rebel against the Hellenists who were not preserving the culture of the Torah wisdom. And so Levi does tshuva, and that's why the Leviim are the heroes of the Chashmonaim. The Hanukkah story is led by Levi doing tshuva for the sin of the brothers, of all the brothers. And, of course, they were complicitly part of it. They didn't answer Shimon, but at least Levi was silent. And here he does tshuva for that. And the miracle of Yemei Matityahu ben Yochanan Kohen Gadol abad mibnei Levi. Last line, letaken chet michirat Yosef. Ultimately, this was their way of fixing the sin of the brothers and their own sin as well of selling Yosef, of the hatred between the brothers, of their sin towards their brother Yosef. So Hanukkah, amazingly, is also a celebration of trying to fix the sin of Yosef and the hatred of Yosef and his brothers, what we're reading about now in this week's Parsha. Whether it has to do with, some people say, why do we light candles? Candles, there's many, many different rituals. They could have told us to blow a shofar. Could have told us to, shoot a bow and arrow. Lighting candles. And the candles have to be ner ishu beito. You light it with your household, members of the household. Some people say you should stand near the candles. And when you light a candle, what does the candle enable you to do? Enables you to see for yourself, but it also enables you to see your brother. Enables you to see and be sensitive, like Yosef was in the dark pit of the jail in Egypt. And he asked them, you're not supposed to use it. I know it's a metaphorically. But to be able to see and be sensitive to the people around you as well. And when you light one candle, it's not only for you. If you have somebody next to you, he's going to get benefit from the candle. No skin off your back, as they say. Candle for one person is a candle for 100 people. You can't have a candle only for you. And so there is an element of this communal oneness, unity, which is fostered by the lights. And that's another way of saying that these candles, what we have to do when we light the candles together with all the members of the household together, is some kind of fixing for the sin of the Yosef and his brothers, of the enmity between the brothers, the jealousy which they had between them, not being able to consider them, even a brother. Nasumi Zeh, they left their brotherhood, and they sort of cut him off. And at first they tried to kill him. At the end, they sold him down to the river. And Yehuda could not be the king. Right? The Hasmoneans made themselves into kings. They were from the wrong tribe. Kingdom is only kind of supposed to be from the tribe of Judah, not from the tribe of Levi. But temporarily, they had this kingdom, and it was because they were the ones who were doing the tshuva. They were the ones who were trying to restore the wisdom which Yosef represented. And as a ben zikunim, he has a play on words where zikna means chokhmah, and it's a beautiful connection between Parshat Shavua and the Hanukkah story. Questions, comments? There's one more piece which I don't have it to give out to you. Here he says one more thing. He says, there is a custom that on Hanukkah, people go around collecting tzedakah. And he says there's actually a tradition that, which was the poorest of all of the tribes? Tribe of Shimon. Because Yaakov, at the end of his life, he curses out Shimon. And he says, Achalkeim b'Yaakov, v'afitzem b'Yisrael. I'm going to scatter Shimon throughout all the other tribes. Out of all the other tribes, Shimon doesn't have his own land. Shimon is sort of subsumed within the plot of Yehudah. Shimon doesn't have his own land because Yaakov said, I'm going to scatter them around. Somebody who's scattered around, he ends up begging from everybody.
Isn't there a tradition in Muslim that he's responsible for the education of small kids?
Yes, exactly. He puts that together. As school teachers are very poor. they're like begging for their wages, and so there's a connection there. And he says, so what do? You light the Hanukkah candles at the door, where the poor people ask for their tzedakah, and there's a lot of other hints here, but pretty much Shimon is getting his comeuppance for selling Yosef, and that's through being the beggar, and that's why the Hanukkah candles are supposed to be at the doorway. Another hint to the fact that Shevet Levi, they fixed it. They were dedicating their lives to save the Jewish people, to save the wisdom, and we commemorate it at the doorways of the Jewish people. Shimon did not really sacrifice himself in that way. He didn't do as much tshuva, and so the beggars sort of symbolically represent the children of Shimon. They go around to the doorways to ask for tzedakah on Hanukkah, basically sort of accepting upon themselves the punishment for this sin of selling their brother Yosef. So it's another hint to Hanukkah sort of being a commemoration of the sin and the fixing of it, at least by the Shevet of Levi, who fixed it by trying to make up for their selling of Yosef. May we learn the message to appreciate our brothers and not let things get out of hand, not to lever that you shouldn't have a clear lines of communication and ability to talk to your brothers, your metaphorical brothers, all the Jewish people, and also your real brothers, also within the family as well. But these messages are from the Parsha, together with Hanukkah. Hashem should see our unity. That's why we're being successful so far in the Israeli army, because all those people that were demonstrating against each other for the entire last year, getting almost close to violence, now they're shoulder to shoulder fighting against the bad guys, and we're realizing that we're all in the same boat, and we have to get together and make sure that we win against our enemies. Be'ezrat Hashem, through our learning Torah, it should be for the healing of the sick and for the Ilui Neshama of those souls who gave up their lives. And we should see salvation and miracles. Be'ezrat Hashem, winning of the war of the Jewish people today. Vayamim hahem bazman hazeh. Amen. Okay, you could stop the...